We are joined here in the Beijing studio, Ms. He Wenping, who is a professor at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Welcome, ma'am. In Ramallah, Palestine, we have Mr. Mustafa Barghouti, who is the Secretary General of Palestinian National Initiative and also a member of the Palestinian Parliament. Welcome, sir. And also in Tel Aviv, Israel, we have Mr. Marcus Sheff, who is a Middle East political commentator. Welcome as well. First of all, may I ask our Palestinian guest, what do you think about the timing of dissolve of the coalition government? Will the division between Fatah and Hamas fixable or not anymore in the short term?
Well, first of all, I have to correct what was mentioned in your report. What we had so far is not a unity government, and it's not a coalition government. What we had is what's called a government of technocrats, independents, consensus government that did not include representative of political parties or elected members of the parliament.
All right.
So this consensus government tried to do its work, but it did not succeed. What we need now is a change. And so the change that is being proposed and that will be discussed on Monday is the formation of a national unity government that really includes all the parties and would proceed with implementation of reconciliation agreement between Palestinian groups.
But may I just follow up a little bit, Mr. Barghouti? What did not happen when this government, as you put it, a consensus government, years ago, could happen it now? Many would wonder.
This government, I believe so, because the consensus government was weak. It was weak. It could not implement what it was supposed to implement. Of course, the Israeli siege on Gaza, which is much stricter than it was before the last attack on Gaza, has prevented also the process of reconstruction in Gaza, which makes also the government embarrassed because they could not conduct the reconstruction of the 96,000 houses that were destroyed by, and structures that were destroyed partially or completely by Israel. And also because this government could not solve the other civil issues due to the fact that it was not perceived as a government that represents everybody. In my opinion, the only solution out of this situation is to form a national unity government in a similar way to what we did in 2007, but with guarantees from the international community that it will not be obstructed or besieged or boycotted.
Well, Mr. Sheff, therefore, I want to invite you for your opinion. Not to be obstructed, not to be intervened, that's the word earlier used by Mr. Barghouti. But the realities on the ground, we all understand it's very complicated, not only within the Palestinians themselves, but also with Israel around, and several other countries also want to have a say. Is that realistic?
Well, I think, we have to look back at a period of time. And, you go back several years, Fatah and Hamas and other Palestinian factions have simply not been able to sit together in government. That is the absolute fact of the matter. It doesn't matter if the Israelis are in the picture, if the Egyptians are in the picture, Qatar's international community, they seem utterly incapable of this famous unity which the Palestinian people are talking about and which clearly the Palestinian people want. You go back to 2007 when the Palestinian Authority was running the Gaza Strip, and in the summer, Hamas essentially took over through the Palestinian Authority, through the Fatah people off roofs, took over the place and have been running it ever since. So, the problem here is very clear. It is the Palestinian factions, can they get on or not? We've been hearing for years about talks of unity. Nothing comes about this. So, you can blame anybody you like, but the Palestinian factions need to look to themselves and ask themselves why they cannot work together.
Mr. Barghouti, it's your own problem, according to Mr. Chef.
Of course it is our problem, first of all. When we speak about unity government today, we speak not only about having an effective and strong government, but also we are talking about bringing back democracy, bringing back the right of the people to choose their representatives in free elections, bringing back the freedom of expression and no political oppression internally. This is all our problem. But Israel's problem lies in the fact that they try constantly to separate Gaza from the West Bank.
Okay.
Mr. Netanyahu has always been saying, I can't make peace with Palestinians because they are divided. And when we try to get unified, he says that Abbas has to choose between unity with Hamas or peace with Israel. In my opinion, Israel has made everything it could to prevent unity, but we should not allow them to do so. It is our own problem and we should solve it by ourselves.
May I just follow up a little bit, since you said that we should not allow them to do so, not meaning letting Israelis to interfere into the internal, should be, quote, unity inside the Palestinians. So how can you do that, sir? How can you do that? Let's just say in the short term, is any political agenda already in the minds of both Fatah and also Hamas at this moment that's likely to take place very soon in front of the international community, sir? Very briefly from you.
First of all, I have to say that the Palestinian structure is not only Fatah and Hamas.
Of course, it's much more
There are
complicated
very
than that.
important groups like us who are non-Fatah, non-Hamas, who believe in democracy, and we are doing our best to convince both sides to accept reconciliation. We've reached an agreement. We don't need to reach a new agreement. I was part of a delegation that went to Gaza and concluded an agreement between PLO and Hamas. That agreement includes 7 points. First of all, the government.
We
Second,
don't
bringing back to activity
we don't need to go through the
Palestinian
7
parliament.
points anymore.
Third,
We don't need to go to the 7 points anymore, but great job you did over there.
Yes.
But for now, I want to go to Ms. He here in Beijing.
No.
Very complicated political structure inside the Palestinians themselves. Certainly, there are other forces that want to have a say in or want to sway the political situation, but still, do you see any chance that Fatah and also Hamas, mainly the pillar political influence inside the region, be able to work together at all at this moment?
I think it's very difficult. No matter it's called a consensus government or it's called a national government, I think the key issue here is the two, Hamas and Fatah. It's very hard to work together and to sit down.
What is preventing them from doing so?
Well, one is in control of the West Bank. Another one is in control of the Gaza Strip. So no one would like to give up their authority. So it is quite clearly, even though during the past 1 year, even though in the name they have already formed the consensus government, but in reality, this Fatah government led by the leader Abbas has never executed their authority in the Gaza Strip. So Gaza Strip is still in the charge of this Hamas. So that's why I think now with this news coming by saying Hamas now even had an indirect talk bilaterally with Israel, talking about how to make long-term, even as long as 10 years truce with Israel. So these things I think has irritated with the Fatah based in West Bank.
So, Mr. Chef, is Israel, some wonder, trying to play the strategy of so-called divide and conquer in this regard?
No, I think Israel, really has an extremely minimal role to play in the relationships between the Palestinian factions. Ultimately, these are organizations with completely different worldviews. Hamas is a jihadi, Iran-backed, Qatari-funded organization, and Fatah is clearly a nationalist organization with its face towards the West and towards moderate Sunni countries like Jordan and and other countries. Completely different worldviews. If the Palestinian president, if Abbas cannot set foot in Gaza, which he hasn't, which is a third of the Palestinian population, and yet he is the Palestinian president, I think the problem here goes well beyond anything Israel could say or do.
Mr. Barghouti, I have to go back to you again, even though you have your wonderful 7-point proposal years earlier, but still, sir, we have to face the reality. The reality is there is a huge division and the government has failed. We don't know when the next government can be formed, by whom, and whether it's going to win the support. Gaza, once again, going to be divided between Hamas and also Fatah. What do you think at this moment is the ultimate thing that the Palestinians should do? And how would you compare, sir? I know you have a very much a historical perspective because you're come in a way from a third perspective. What do you think? How is today compared to earlier when we have the peace process going on in the Middle East decades ago? And the momentum then among different factions inside the Palestinian state. What do you think about then and now? What is urgently needed, sir?
Internally, from Palestinian perspective, I think we need two things. First of all, both Fatah and Hamas must give up the whole idea of one-party rule. Both Hamas and Fatah should accept the principle of participation and sharing responsibility. And the second point, we have to have democracy back. The only way to resolve internal differences is through democracy and democratic vote and accept what people decided. The other point, which is very important, is that both Fatah and Hamas must understand they are running an authority without authority. It's an authority under full Israeli military occupation or under full Israeli siege. What we need is a unity of the national liberation movement as we did before, because we need first to liberate ourselves from the system of occupation and apartheid that Israel has created and that is destroying our future and any potential for development in the future.
How was the unity possible earlier, Ms. He, if we look at history, and how it is not possible, at least for now, yet?
I think for the unity, both sides, Hamas and Fatah, they should put the Palestinians' things at first. People's interest and the nation's interest first.
Well,
for example,
if you're
they
talking
would
about
like to get this Palestinian statehood. I think this is #1 priority for all of those Palestinians, no matter it's lived in Gaza Strip or in the West Bank. Because in this pursuing process, I think they have already achieved a lot of issues. For example, they're now becoming the member of UNESCO.
Right.
Now they have been now becoming the observer in the United Nations. So that just like running a 1,000 meters race, you have already finished like 800 meters. Now the remain the 200 meters. Now you lose the unity, and then you have different purpose, direction. That will be very, very unfortunate thing for the Palestinian people,
right,
and also for this statehood pursuit.
That is certainly a pity over there. But then people would ask, what can Israel do? I mean, Israel has always been the big obstruction over there from the Palestinian state being established and always playing certain strategies among the Palestinians. Mr. Chef, Israel, at this moment, what role is it, do you think, it is playing?
Well, since the early 90s, Israel has reached out to the Palestinians with various peace plans. And every single time the Palestinians have walked away from those peace plans. I think, the Palestinians, Mustafa Barghouti is talking about what they need to do in order to democratize and in order to unify. I think the Palestinians need to think about what they need to do if they really want this two-state solution to happen, what they need to do in order to telegraph to their leadership that they want it to happen. Because so far, the leadership has veered away every single time to come to Israel's outstretched hands and come to a solution.
Okay, Barghouti, before we go, final words from you. Are you running the final 200 meters for out of 1,000, or are you starting a new one, another new 1,000 meters before going to the final line? Mr. Barghouti.
No, I believe we can solve this problem. We'll do our efforts to create a national unity government. But for the Israeli side, they haven't been forward-coming with peace plans, no. What they are doing is expansion of settlements, consolidation of a system of apartheid, and this should be resisted. The Israelis, unfortunately, have chosen the most extreme and racist government in their history, and they have to rethink their choice, because that's, with such a government, there will be no peace and no two-state solution. Thank you.
There are a lot of foods for thought for many. I think at least I can put it in that way. Mr. Mustafa Barghouti from the Palestinian National Initiative Inside Palestine, and also in Tel Aviv, Mr. Marcus Sheff, the Middle East political commentator, and here in Beijing, Ms. He Wenping from the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. Thank you so much for the three of you